All right, so in this class, we will talk about the different types of elasticities. So the definition of elasticity is the relationship between a percentage change in one variable and the percentage change in another variable. Price elasticity measures the responsiveness of the quantity demanded of a good to a change in its price. So what this elasticity tries to capture is if the price of bread had to increase by 2 Rand, how much will the demand of the bread change by? So if price increases by 2 Rand, maybe the demand for bread will decrease by 2 units, for example. Okay, so price elasticity tries to explain the change in demand for a product due to an increase in its price. But the application of elasticity is beyond just quantity demanded or the effect of price on quantity demanded. It is also used to explain the impact of any other determinant of demand. So as you know, the determinants of demand would be your income, the price of substitute goods, the price of complement goods, right? Your quantity demanded from the perspective of a consumer is influenced by not only price, but then also your income and the price of other goods in the market. And it's the concept of elasticity also does not speak about demand alone. It also explains supply, quantity supplied. So from the perspective of the producer, elasticity might explain what will the effect of a price increase have on the quantity supplied and not the quantity demanded from the perspective of a producer. Okay. So just to repeat, the non-price determinants of demand would be your income, because the more income you have, the more buying power that you have, so you can buy a new car, a new house. So income influences your quantity demanded, and price as well. But then these are the non-price, but then just to explain the effect of a price increase on demand. So if inflation keeps on increasing, right, maybe the inflation for clothing keeps on increasing, price levels rise in the fashion industry, you'll start not buying these expensive sneakers anymore because they'll just be too expensive for your budget. Okay, so increase in prices tend to decrease quantity demanded, right? Because you're working under a budget and some goods need to be not spent on in order for you to still have money to spend on other goods and services. All right, so that's price. And then the other determinants of demand would be taste and preferences, right? Some people have a taste in going to restaurants. Okay, so if you have a taste for restaurants, or maybe some people have a taste for watching soccer matches. Some people have a taste for going camping. Some people have a taste for maybe riding motorbikes, you know, so your tastes also have an effect on your demand. Another determinant of demand is the price of complements. Complement goods. So a complement good is would be goods such as coffee and sugar. Okay. So if the price of sugar had to increase, you'll start demanding less coffee, because now coffee, which is a mixture of coffee and sugar, is now more expensive. So an increase in the price of coffee or sugar will have a negative effect on the demand for both products because they are complements. And then the price of substitutes as well. So a substitute good that I can think of would be sneakers, because I know that you guys are still in varsity and you guys like dressing and stuff. So sneakers. So you have Puma and Nike. Okay. So if Nike sneakers start becoming ridiculously expensive, you guys will start demanding less Nike sneakers and will start buying um, the sneakers from Puma, who's Nike's competitor, because Puma has cheaper sneakers, but then just the same quality, right? So all these companies compete with each other, right? Especially companies that operate in the same industry, whether it be restaurants, whether it be the sneaker industry, um, firms in the competitive markets always try to win customers by decreasing their prices because they know that the consumer will always choose the cheaper product, which is the substitute, right? And then another determinant of demand is interest rates. So interest rates are really the price of money. And if the price of money increases, then, or if the interest rates increase, then it will be more expensive to obtain financing or loans. If loans are more expensive now because of a higher interest rate, consumers will start demanding less mortgage loans or house loans. They'll also tend to not spend on or get financing for a new car. So whenever interest rates rise, getting financing for a car or a house becomes more expensive, which results in a decrease in the demand for houses and cars because of an increase in the price of financing. And then taxes, the higher are the higher are the taxes, whether it be corporate taxes or value added tax. That means less money for the consumer, and less money means less demand. So tax is another determinant of demand. So these factors listed above speak about the determinants of demand. There's also determinants of supply, because demand is from the perspective of a consumer and supply is from the perspective of the producer. Okay. So with the determinants of supply, these are the number of firms in the actual market, and also technology would be the determinants of supply, because the more the number of the firms operating in a certain market will determine whether that market has a competitive market or a monopolistic market or an oligopoly market, right? So depending on which market you're operating in, that will influence your supply. And another determinant of supply would be technology. Take, for example, a farmer. If a farmer is using tools such as your handheld used tools, maybe like your shovel, your picks, like tools that need to be operated using hard labor from a person. That person will find it hard to produce a lot of wheat or rice, for example, because they are reliant more on hard labor from individuals. Okay. But then if the farmer has a tractor, or they have a tractor which can basically mow the land and basically plant all the seeds to grow the crops, that person will be able to supply a lot more food because they are using technology, they are using tractors, they're also using computers to analyze the soil quality, and they're using the right ingredients to grow the wheat and all the vegetables, right? So that will have a positive effect on the number of goods that they supply. Okay. All right, so I'm just trying to hope that everything's going well. So we were speaking generally about the price elasticity of demand. Now let's also talk about the income elasticity of demand. So income elasticity of demand measures how the quantity demanded of a product responds to a change in a consumer's income. So what income elasticity of demand tries to explain is how much will the quantity demanded for a product change if income increases? Okay. So the formula for elasticity of demand is EY, E for elasticity and Y, because Y in economics captures income. So the formula for elasticity of demand is in the denominator you have percentage change in income, and in the numerator you have change in quantity demanded. Okay, because this formula basically tries to explain that if my income increases by 10%, by how much percent will the quantity demanded for clothes be, for example, right? So maybe if my income increases by 10%, I might demand 7% more clothes because I love clothes, all right? So that is for normal goods. So your normal goods are goods that you love. So that would be your food, your clothes, cars, and housing, okay? All the good things that you guys love. But then there's also a distinction between normal goods and luxury goods because luxury goods is now your Gucci's, your Ferraris, your Mercedes, eating at Tasha's, all the fancy things, the fancy places and stuff. And then you also have inferior goods, goods that you only turn to when you have no money. So maybe that is instant noodles, or maybe your fat cooks, or amakwenya, okay, or any other inferior good that you don't spend on unless you have a tight budget, okay, because you are just trying to survive, all right? So you have those three types of goods, your normal goods, your inferior goods, and your luxury goods, which are extremely expensive, right? So if my income increases, I'll obviously spend more on normal goods, which is food. I'll spend more on petrol because I'll travel to more places. I'll spend more on clothes, right? Because I love clothes. I'll basically spend more in general on normal goods. But then if my or if a person's income suddenly decreases, then they'll start spending more on cheaper goods because now they have a tighter budget or they have less money. So they start buying cheaper goods or inferior goods because they are trying to survive. And then if that person had to suddenly win the lotto and become rich, then they'll start spending more on luxury goods, They'll spend on normal goods, of course, food, clothing, shelter, of course, but then they'll also start spending excessively on luxury goods such as your Gucci's, your Louis Vuittons, your uh, all the expensive things because now they feel wealthier and they want to show off to people that they are wealthy. So they'll start spending more on luxury goods, right? Hence, that's why we say that The income elasticity is positive for normal goods because the more money you have, you'll spend more in general on normal goods and services. And then the income elasticity is negative for inferior goods because as your income increases, you'll start looking down on inferior goods. You won't go to cheap places anymore. So you'll spend more on normal goods and luxury goods. Hence, the income elasticity is negative for inferior goods. And the income elasticity is positive for luxury goods because the more money that you have, you'll start spending excessively on expensive things, expensive items. All right. So in terms of the demand curve, because when your income increases, you'll spend more on normal goods. So obviously your demand curve will shift to the right. Okay. Okay. Sunday swa. Let me try to unmute her. Allow mic. Yes. Sunday Swantege.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you please go back to that slide of the inferior? I've got a question on that line.
Okay. Which slide?
It's not this one. There was a previous one that you talked. Yes, this one. It's saying the income elasticity is negative. Demand decreases as income increases. Is the income increases here or it decreases?
So when your income increases, the demand for that product will decrease because it is an inferior good.
So I'm just confused now on that last one, as income increases. Because you were talking
Alright.
most when the income here is that decreases.
Okay, so let's just talk about all of them from the start. So for normal goods, demand increases as income increases. So as your income increases, you'll spend more on normal goods, your food and your utilities. So with inferior goods, demand decreases as income increases because as your income increase, you'll spend less on inferior goods, goods that you see as inferior or cheap goods. Okay, and then for luxury goods, demand increases significantly as income increases because as your income increases by a large amount, you'll start spending excessively on cars, clothes, houses, jewelry, So that's why they say demand increases by a large margin as income increases because human beings are like that naturally. They love expensive things. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, thanks. I understand now.
Okay. Thank you for the question. And then any other question? I see Sinaza still has her hand up. Sinazo? Okay. Not sure what's happening there. Let me just lower her hand. Okay, I wanted to show the effect on a graph. Right, so your normal supply and demand schedules. So you have your price, you have your quantity, and you have your origin. Okay. So let's take a normal good. You know, I'm actually writing this with my touchpad. I wish that I had a mouse here. I lost my mouse. So this is a normal good. Let me just write the word good to make it clear. Right, it's normal good. You would have, so your demand line is downward sloping because you know from economics that demand decreases or demand increases because this is quantity demanded. This would be QD, quantity demanded. So demand increases as price decreases, okay? And then demand decreases as prices increase. All right, for a normal good, which is food and basic utilities, normal goods are goods that you love in general. They are separate from luxury goods, which are expensive goods that you buy because you have a lot of money, okay? So an increase in income for uh, a normal good would result in a rightward shift in this line. In the demand schedule or in the demand line. So an increase in income would result in a rightward shift in the demand curve for a normal good. Okay. And then for an inferior good, okay, let me just do all of this on the same graph to make it to just make it faster. Okay. So assuming that this is the reference, right? This is the line or the neutral line. Okay. So this line represents the demand schedule or the demand line for a normal good, an inferior good, and a luxury good. This is like the center or the reference line. So for a normal good, if income increases, the demand for a normal good would increase, which would result in a rightward shift in the demand line for a normal good. For a luxury good now, an increase in income would result in a larger rightward shift in the demand line. Okay. So this is for a luxury good. Okay. So I'll just make an L for luxury, and here I'll make it N for normal good. Okay. And then here I'll make it black for an inferior good. As the income of a person increases, they'll start consuming less inferior goods. So the demand schedule will shift to the left, reflecting the fact that now they spend less on inferior goods because they have more money to spend on normal goods and luxury goods. All right, so for necessities, the elasticity, the income necessity value is less than 1. So it might be 0.2 or 0.5 or 0.9, okay? The actual figure, because remember we were talking about this formula, okay? The demand elasticity formula is percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in income. So that gives you a figure. And for normal goods or necessities, this value is between the value of 0 and 1, which reflects that as your income increases, you'll generally spend more on normal goods or your necessities, such as groceries and your water and electricity. Okay. And then for inferior goods, this demand elasticity value is negative, which reflects the fact that as your income increases, you spend less on inferior goods because now you have more money to spend on normal goods and luxury goods. And for luxury goods, this demand elasticity value is greater than 1. So it might be 1.5 or 2 or 3 because the more richer you become, the more you spend on luxury. Okay, you spend excessively because human beings, uh, they love expensive things. Um, they love riches. Okay, and it's also not a sin to love expensive things, right? It is good because we are all blessed and we all deserve the best. Okay, but then some people chase too much of luxury goods because they believe that having luxury is the best that you can have in life, but then happiness anybody can achieve happiness, really. Okay, regardless of how much you have. Yeah, let me just stick to economics and talk less about life. All right, let me stick to what is important. But then I hope that you guys understand what I'm trying to say. Okay. Um. So we spoke about this. What would happen to the demand curve of a normal good if your income had to increase? Obviously, there would be a rightward shift with higher income. And for normal goods, the income necessity value is between the values of 0 and 1. And then okay, I also touched on this. Okay, see, I just summarized everything into that graph that I was talking about. But then for luxury good, the elasticity value is greater than 1. And for inferior goods, the elasticity value is negative because demand decreases as income increases. Okay. And then for luxury goods, demand increases faster than income. Okay, because individuals generally love luxury. And then for necessities, demand increases, but at a slower pace than income. Okay, because there's only so much necessities that you can have. You don't need necessities in excess. You know, there's only so much water that you can consume in a day. There's only so much bread that you can consume in a day. All right, but then for cars and houses, it's limitless. A person can have 10 houses, 10 cars, 10 wives, you know, because people in general, they love luxury and they spend all that they have on luxury because it makes them happy. Okay, and these elasticity values are used to predict which industries will grow most rapidly as the incomes of consumers grow, or which industries will be most affected negatively when the economy goes into a recession. So in a recession, which is an economy where there's high unemployment and people have little money, you'll find that the demand for inferior goods will increase, right? And the demand for luxury goods will decrease. And then in times of economic expansion, where there's high employment, high consumer spending, and people have a lot of money, you'll find that there'll be an increase, a large increase in the demand for normal goods and luxury goods, and there'll be a decrease in the demand for inferior goods. Okay. So that was income elasticity. Now we move on to cross elasticity of demand. So the cross elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of the quantity demanded of one good to a change in the price of another good, okay, whether it be a complement or a substitute good. So in this case, we are modeling demand based on the price of other goods, whether it be a complement good or a substitute good. Previously, we were modeling the demand of a consumer using income, okay, but then now it's not income, now it's the price of complement good or a substitute good, okay. And remember, I also touched on this in the previous slides. So the formula for cross elasticity, take note, cross elasticity, because now we are looking at the prices of complement and substitute goods. And take notes of this. Okay, here it's supposed to be income, right? Okay, I can't edit this now, or can I? Let me just try. Okay, it's fine, I can't. But then I was just trying to point this out. This is about income elasticity, right? And this is now about cross elasticity, which measures the responsiveness of the quantity demanded of one good to a change in the price of another good, complement or substitute good. So the formula for cross elasticity is change in the quantity demanded of good A divided by the percentage change in the price of good B. So what this formula of cross elasticity tries to explain is what will happen if, so let's just talk about complement goods such as coffee and sugar. All right. So if the price of sugar had to increase by 10%, how much of coffee will be demanded? By how much will the demand for coffee change by as a result of the price increase of sugar? Okay, so maybe the demand for coffee will decrease by 5% as well, because coffee and sugar are consumed together, and the price of sugar would make coffee more expensive, so people will demand less coffee, right? Because the price of the complement good has increased, right? So the cross elasticity of complements is negative because these goods go together. But then for substitute goods, such as Coca-Cola and Pepsi, if the price of Coca-Cola had to increase by a large margin, then the demand for Pepsi would suddenly increase because people will not spend on Coca-Cola anymore. They'd rather spend on the cheaper substitute good, which is Pepsi. So the cross elasticity value for substitute goods is, because here there's an increase, okay, so an increase in the price of Coke, then people will rush to spend on the substitute goods. So this will also increase. So that will lead to a positive value for the cross elasticity of substitute goods, and then it is negative for complement goods. I hope that made sense. So as I was saying, substitute goods, which are your Coca-Cola and Pepsi, it is positive. The cross elasticity value is positive for substitute goods, and it is negative for complement goods, coffee and sugar. All right, so that was your cross elasticity. And now we move on to price elasticity of supply. And before I move on to that part, let me just check if there's any questions. All right, so now let's talk about price elasticity of supply. Okay. So this measures how sensitive the quantity supply is to a change in price. So this now is from the perspective of the producer. Previously, we were looking at quantity demanded, right? Elasticity of the quantity demanded line. Now we are talking about the elasticity of the quantity supplied line. And what are the determinants of supply? What determines supply really? Because now this is from the perspective of a producer. What influences supply would be income, interest rates, number of firms, what else? Labor, okay? Um, policies and regulations all influence producers or suppliers or the quantity supplied line. And the formula for price elasticity of supply is a change in quantity supplied over a percentage change in price. So elasticity is always measured in percentage changes in quantity supplied or percentage change in price. Okay? And we have perfectly inelastic supply or inelastic supply. We also have unit elastic supply, and perfectly elastic supply. Okay? So I'm just going to try to draw these graphs on the whiteboard for you guys to make it easier. Okay? All right, so for perfectly, okay. Okay, let me just draw the graph rather. So I'm just trying to show you guys the supply curves because now we are speaking about supply curves and not demand curves. So on your y-axis, you have price and quantity supplied. All right, and here you have origin. Um, so a perfectly inelastic supply curve would look something like this. Okay, this is perfectly inelastic because regardless of the price, suppliers will supply this amount of this product. And an example of such a product would be insulin, which is the medication taken by diabetic patients. Okay, so regardless of the price, whether the price increases or decreases, suppliers will supply the same amount of insulin because there's generally the same number of insulin patients who consume a constant amount of insulin, right? So even if the price had to increase to 1 million or decrease to 10 Rand, they still supply the same amount of insulin because insulin patients are fixed and they consume a constant amount of insulin. And then you have, because this is perfectly inelastic. This is a perfectly inelastic supply curve. Then you also have an inelastic supply curve. All right. Excuse me. So this is perfectly inelastic. Okay. Sorry, the vertical curve is perfectly inelastic and the steep curve is elastic. Sorry, is inelastic. And then you have a perfectly elastic supply curve, which is a horizontal line. And then you have a elastic line, which is a flat line. Okay. So this would be inelastic. Just put an I. Perfectly inelastic. So I'll just put PI. And then here I'll put I for inelastic. Here I'll put an E for elastic. And here I'll put a PE for perfectly elastic. Okay. And an example of a perfectly inelastic supply curve is the one for the supply of insulin. And inelastic supply is seen in the market for tuition, right? Tuition fees. Because if tuition fees increase, okay, universities will hire more lecturers, right? Because they know that if the tuition fees increase by 1,000 Rand per annum, they know that students are going to continue to demand tuition because tuition is vital for your future. So they know that regardless of the price increase in tuition, they'll still have many students applying for university. So they will continue increasing the supply for tuition because they know that uh, learners from high school will always demand tuition, right? And then for the elastic curve now, um, so in this case, a small change in price. So maybe if the price increases by 2 Rand, they know that quantity supplied will also increase by 2 units, for example. So an example of a good that has an elastic supply curve is alcohol and cigarettes, because suppliers know that if the price increases, consumers will still buy the product because they love the product that much, such as cigarettes and alcohol. So regardless of the price increase, they will always increase the supply because they know that people are addicted to the product and they'll buy the product no matter the price. Okay, and then for the perfectly elastic supply curve, such a product would be products in the competitive market, such as wheat, right? Because farmers usually have a large store of wheat in their barns, and they're always trying to capitalize on price increase. So no matter how small the price increase is, they'll always supply a large amount of wheat, because because the wheat market is very competitive. Many farmers have wheat and they are all competing for the same market share, right? They're competing for the same customers. So if the price increases by a small margin, they'll try to sell all of their wheat because they know that they have competitors in the market. Okay. So in summary, just understand that a vertical line A supply curve that is a vertical line is perfectly inelastic. A steep supply line is inelastic. A flat supply line is elastic. And a horizontal supply line is perfectly elastic. Price elasticity of supply value for a perfectly inelastic supply curve, the elasticity of supply value is 0, okay? And then for an inelastic or steep supply line, that value will be between 0 and 1, okay? An example would be tuition fees. And then for a unit elastic supply curve, um, the elasticity of supply figure will be 1. And then for an elastic supply curve, the elasticity of supply value will be between 1 and infinity. And for a perfectly elastic supply line, the elasticity value will be infinity. Okay, and I actually forgot to speak about a unit elastic supply line. I forgot to include it there in my graph. But the unit elastic just means that a 1 unit increase in price will lead to a 1 unit increase in quantity supplied, or a 2 units, a 3 units, or a 5 units increase in price will lead to a 5. See, it's like 1 to 1, you know. So a 1 unit increase in price will lead to a 1 unit increase in quantity supplied. Okay, it's 1 to 1 relationship. Okay, and that is for bread, because if the price of bread increases by 1 rand, consumers will, or maybe to put it this way, if the price of bread increases by 5%, suppliers will increase their supply by 5% because they know that consumers will still always demand bread because bread is such a valuable product to families. Okay, and then for an elastic supply line, um, producers or drug dealers, they'll supply any amount of drugs because they know that even if the price increases by 10%, 50%, or 100%, they know that addicts of the drugs will continue to consume that products regardless of the drug. Hence why the elasticity figure is between 1 and infinity. Okay. And then for a perfectly elastic supply curve, those refer to goods in the competitive market where firms are competing for the same customers. Okay. And so obviously any small increase in price will cause the suppliers to supply as much of their products as possible because they are competing for the same market share. All right. And other determinants of the price elasticity of supply. So basically what influences supply or the elasticity of supply in the short run?
I think the students were asking you on the chat, we'll need more explanation on the perfectly elasticity. One student.
Okay. Perfect elasticity. All right. So a perfectly elastic supply curve is this one, the horizontal one. And supply here is perfectly elastic because the firms are operating in a highly competitive market. So as you know, okay, please share the screen. I don't know what happened to.
If you can share the screen for that slide.
All right, so as I was saying, this is a perfectly elastic supply curve because these firms operate in a competitive market. And as you know, in a competitive market, the suppliers or the firms have the same, they sell the same product, you know. Maybe they are selling, what can I, wheat, you know, because wheat is a very like in the derivatives markets, right? In the commodities markets, wheat is very popular. You know, everybody is trading wheat. But then a more simpler example would be street vendors that are maybe selling fruits and vegetables in the same taxi rank, for example. So that is a very competitive market because you guys are all selling the same products. Okay. And as a result, if the price of those fruits and vegetables had to increase by 5%, the sellers of these fruits and vegetables would try to sell as many fruits and vegetables as possible because they are competing, you know, and they're all competing for the same customers. So they'll increase their supply. They'll buy much more vegetables and fruits to sell them as much as possible and make a profit because they are operating in such a competitive market where they're selling the same thing to the same consumer. Okay. Hence why so regardless of the price, okay. So here it's at a constant price. So at any price level, they'll supply so maybe let's just assume that this is 10, okay, and this is maybe 20, and this is 30. All right, and this is maybe let's just say 5 rand. Okay, maybe the price of banana is 5 rand. So these consumers, they'll try to sell as much of like as many bananas as they can at 5 rand because they are trying to maximize their profits, right? Even if the price was 10 rand, okay? Even if the price, because then the supply curve would be on this level, okay? So regardless of the price level, they'll try to sell as many bananas as possible because they are operating in a competitive market and they are trying to maximize their profits. Okay, I hope that made sense. You know, it is very difficult to explain these microeconomic graphs, but then the best way to understand this is to just understand, because in your assignments, we won't go into so much detail as to explain why this graph is perfectly elastic and in which markets does a perfectly elastic graph occur in. We won't ask you that. We would just ask you about like which graph is inelastic, right? And what is the supply elasticity value? Is it 0? Is it between 0 and 1? Is it greater than 1? Okay, because here it's 0 and then here it is infinity, right? And then here it is between 0 and 1 and then here it is greater than 1. So if you know that, then you have a good foundation to then try to understand in which markets all these supply curves occur in. But then I've summarized it here in the slides, okay? That a perfectly inelastic supply curves occurs in the market for insulin, inelastic tuition fees, and I spoke about these examples, bread, drugs, weeds, etc. Okay. But then try to understand the shapes of the supply curve. All right, so I spoke about this slide. Okay. Now let's move on to the determinants of price elasticity of supply. So basically what influences supply in the short run, right? So supply is more inelastic. So inelastic just means that producers find it hard to produce more goods and services at every price level, right? And then elastic means that producers are able to produce more goods and services, so a lot more goods and services at any price level, right? And in the short run, supply is inelastic, right? So producers find it hard to produce goods and services due to limited flexibility, because in the short run, in order for you to change your supply, so in order for you to produce more goods and services, whether it be in the farming markets, maybe you're producing wheat, or maybe you are in the retail industry, or you are producing clothes, or whether you are in the restaurants business, you will always find it difficult to change your supply levels, to change the amount of goods and services you produce in the short run, because you have to change your machinery, which requires capital and financing. You also have to change your technology, which is expensive. You also have to change your labor, right? And it's also hard to change labor in the short run, because you need to conduct interviews, find the right workers, and also train them, you know? So it's hard to change your supply abilities in the short run. But then in the long run, supply is more elastic, right? As producers can adjust factors of production. So your factors of production are your land, your labor, your capital, and your technology. So in the long run, producers can invest in more machinery. They can invest in more workers, because now they can train those workers in the long run until they're able to perform the work diligently and to produce as many goods as possible. And in the long run, so land, labor, you can change your labor in the long run, you can change your machinery, you can also adopt faster forms of technology, which will enhance your production process, okay? And then what also influences the elasticity of the supply line are expected prices. So if prices are expected to rise temporarily, then supply remains inelastic, right? So if producers know that prices will only increase in the short run, but then come back to their original levels in the long run. So if the price increase is temporary, then producers will not bother to change their supply, the quantity supplied levels, because they don't see the need. Because why increase prices? So because why increase your supply if the price increase is temporary? No, because that will cause you to constantly adjust your prices, which will be bad for business. It will be bad for your demand. But then if prices are expected to remain high for the future, or for a long period of time, then suppliers will start investing um, in more, they'll start investing more in production to produce more goods and services, because they know that prices will increase in the long run, and then they'll be able to capitalize on those prices in the long run. Okay. And then you also have different types of firms, right? You have a labor-intensive firm and you have a capital-intensive firm. So a labor-intensive firm is one that relies heavily on individuals to perform the work, and a capital-intensive firm is one that relies more on machinery and technology to produce their goods and services. And supply is more inelastic in a labor-intensive firm, because they are reliant on labor, and labor is very difficult to obtain, because you need to do interviews first, you need to find the right people, you need to train them, right? So it is hard for firms that are labor intensive to change their supply levels in the short run, because their production process is reliant on labor. But then for capital intensive firms, their supply is more elastic. They can produce any amount of goods at any time, whether it be in the short run or long run, because they know that they just need to find the right machine. They just need to find um, enough funds and financing to buy all the technology and the machinery that is important for their production. And if they have found it, then they'll produce any amount of goods that they need, right? Because it is easier to obtain technology and machinery than it is to obtain labor individuals. Because, as you know, machines are more efficient than labor. Labor is more efficient in a creative work, right? But then machinery and robots are really taking over, and many jobs will be eliminated in the future because nowadays all the little or all the simple jobs are being taken by AI and machinery that are being adopted by companies because they can see that all these robots and these machine and these technologies are more efficient than workers, and they save a lot of money by adopting these machineries. And they can also produce many more products using technology and machinery. So hence why many jobs will be lost in the future because of AI and the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, and then the last slide, we'll be talking about the elasticity in agricultural products. So suppliers in the agricultural industry have inelastic supply because their products tend to perish. So their supply is inelastic, or it is hard for them to supply many products at any price level, because if they stock, maybe if they stock all their barns with rice and wheat, if they have a lot of stock, then they face the risk of that stock decaying because, food is perishable, okay? But then for a company that sells car parts, for example, then they have more elastic supply. They can supply any amount of their car parts at any price level. And that is because they sell goods that are not perishable, because car parts are usually made of steel, and steel can last for many years. Okay, so it is easy for them to stockpile all the relevant car parts that they can supply at any price level and at any time. So they have so industries in the car parts industry have supply curves that are elastic, right, compared to supply curves in the farming industry. They are inelastic because it is hard for them to stockpile their barns with rice and eggs and all these perishable goods, because if they stock too much, then these goods will decay and they'll make a loss. All right, so that was the last slide. I hope that you guys are able to listen to me properly. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. So let me just unshare my screen. All right, any questions? Come on, guys, any questions? I just delivered like a 45 minutes video and you guys have no questions at all. Okay, I see a comment here. Thank you for an informative session. Thank you as well. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. But then yes, just go through your notes on Moodle, okay? You guys have a nice set of notes there on Moodle and also in the additional resources folder. Just go over all those notes and everything should be clear. For this section, make sure that you understand your formula, understand what we mean by price elasticity, income elasticity, know what we mean by elasticity of supply, know what we mean by the determinants of supply, study all these concepts, and then for the assignments, you should be well prepared. If you go through if you go through this video and all of your notes, you should be well prepared for all of your assignments. Okay. Okay, and somebody is asking me to share the PowerPoints. Okay, I'll try to upload the PowerPoints on Moodle, but then there's no reason for me to upload it because these slides were derived from the notes that are on Moodle. I use those notes to compile these slides. So going through those notes in Moodle will help you because I also use them to do these slides. So there's no reason really for me to send these slides. That's what I'm trying to say. Right, then if you guys have no questions, I'll decide to end this meeting. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention. Hope that you have a good day. And until the next one, bye-bye.